Hello, adventurers! My name is Chance. Welcome to my spellbook, and thank you for tuning in to the second Path of the Barbarian. We're going to be covering the paths or the subclass. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Path of the Battlerager, and this was found in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, and I have very mixed feelings about it. I remember when a lot of the concept art was leaked or released, and I'm like, oh, this looks really good. Oh, this will be fantastic. And then I read through it, and I played with a Battlerager in a one shot, and I'm not the biggest fan personally. They also go by a couple different names. Most people just call them Battleragers. That's the most common way. Axe idiots are also another name for them, and their Dwarvish name, I'm not 100% sure how it's actually pronounced, but it looks like it's Kuldjargh, or something to that effect. From what I understand, they have a lot of lore history behind them, which is cool, I suppose, and they might make for interesting NPCs. However, I got some gripes with the actual subclass itself, and yeah, I don't know. I've never met anyone that's a huge fan of them, for the record. I mean, there might be some of you out there. If there are, comment down beneath and kind of explain to me why. I haven't played one personally, and I've only played in a one-shot with one, so I don't know. Let's move on, however, to their level progression here. So something worth noting is by Raw, this is only a path available to the dwarves. There's lore reasons for that. However, up to the DM discretion. Personally, I don't see an issue with them being used by other races. However, it depends on your world, right? At level 3, you gain the Battlerager armor, at least as so far as to say you can use it. At level 6, you gain Reckless Abandon. At level 10, you gain Battlerager Charge. And at level 14, you gained Spike Retribution. Now let's take a look at the first one you get, the Battlerager armor. You can now don your new best friend. While raging and wearing the armor, use a bonus action to make one melee weapon attack with your body armor spikes against a target within 5 feet of you. If the attack hits, the spikes deal 1d4 piercing damage. You use your strength mod for the attack and damage rolls. Which is okay, a lot of the subclasses let you attack as a bonus action in some capacity or another. Additionally, when you use the attack action to grapple a creature, the target takes 3 piercing damage if your grapple check succeeds, which as a barbarian, you're more than likely to. Now let's take a look at the actual armor itself here. The spiked armor is a rare type of medium armor made by dwarves. It consists of a leather coat and leggings covered with spikes that are usually made of metal. Its cost is 75 gold piece. Its AC is calculated by taking a base of 14 and adding your dexterity modifier to a maximum of 2. And you have disadvantage on stealth checks. Its weight is approximately 45 pounds. The fact that it's separate armor is an issue from time to time, especially if you happen to reach level 3 in an environment that doesn't necessarily facilitate the transfer of material goods, like along a path or trail or in a dungeon even. The odds of you running into something like this just out in the wild are very slim. It's arguably something that you'd have to have a particular craftsman make for you, or you might even have to make it yourself. And for that reason, I don't know, it is very disappointing to gain your path only to not be able to really use anything that pertains to it. Virtually all of your traits that you're going to get with this path need that Battlerager armor. I think all of them except for one, really. In any case, let's move on to Reckless Abandon. This is a trait you get starting at 6th level, and essentially your recklessness protects you. When you use Reckless Attack while raging, you gain temporary hit points equal to your Constitution modifier, minimum of 1. They vanish if any of them are left when your rage ends. This is an interesting idea. I'm not a huge fan of its execution, however. It essentially acts like damage reduction, more or less, right? I mean, assuming you're going to be taking reckless attack quite frequently, you're always going to have some form of temporary hit points. Sadly, there's a couple drawbacks to this. Firstly, it's really minimum. I mean, at higher levels, you're probably only gonna most of you'll only get as high as +5, +6, and that's once again at the higher levels. And at that point, it's kind of not as valuable as you might think. In addition to that, there are feats that do similar things, and also the way temporary hit points work, you can only get them from one source. So if you have someone with the Inspiring Leader feat and you get a bunch of temporary hit points in the morning, all those temporary hit points are replaced by whatever your Constitution modifier is as soon as you decide to do a reckless attack, which is a little bit disappointing to say the least. But that is, of course, my opinion. Let me know what you think down beneath in the comment section. Now let's move on to the Battlerager charge. This is what you get at 10th level, and it lets you rush into battle even faster. While raging, you can take the dash action as a bonus action. In my opinion, for a 10th level trait, I find it to be a little bit lackluster. I know there are some classes that it's even less so for, but I don't know. You might as well just take a small level dip into Rogue and get the same thing, or take the mobile feat. It's, I don't know, it doesn't, I understand why it kind of works with the whole recklessness thing, but you're still not really that well protected, right? I mean, at level 10, odds are your unarmored defense is just as good, if not better, than the spiked armor itself. And even though you do get temporary hit points, it's not that many, and you're going to be separated from the group, and I don't know. I suppose you can make an argument that this trait is meant to help solve the stickiness problem that barbarians run into, with people kind of avoiding them, but I think it does a rather poor job of it. At level 14 and your final trait, you gain access to Spiked Retribution, and essentially enemies attack you at their own risk. While raging and wearing the spiked armor, when a creature within 5 feet of you hits you with a melee attack, the attacker takes 3 piercing damage. I got a lot of gripes with this, especially at level 14. I don't like the idea of flat damage, really, at any point in the game. There are some early level cases where it makes a lot of sense and it's very, very good. Like, I believe Heavy Armor Master acts something to that effect. But at level 14, just 3 piercing damage? I don't know. I suppose you could make the claim that you can poison your spikes and do stuff with them like that, and I would highly recommend doing that, but if for whatever reason your Dungeon Master's against it, or the poison effect wears off midway through the battle, this is kind of useless. And even more so, it's likely just going to make enemies avoid attacking you. And seeing as how the Barbarian's main goal is to be a damage sponge, if enemies are avoiding you, it's not going to matter. I don't really know if there's a better way of fixing this too. I mean, I suppose giving it like 4d6 or something to that effect might work, but that's going to be really, I don't know. This is a hard one, honestly. Let's move on to my personal thoughts here before I start rambling. Looking at this class as a whole, or the subclass rather, I really don't like it. And I'll explain why in the simplest way. Barbarians, for all of their strengths, they have 2 or 3 major weaknesses depending on who you talk to and how they define the third. The first is their stickiness, especially as they start to soak up more and more damage. Dungeon Masters will avoid them in combat, and they'll have creatures selectively target the weaker members of your party. Doing this is kind of worst case scenario for a barbarian. You're meant to soak in damage. You're built for it. It's why the mechanics of rage work the way they do. And as so far as to say you're always supposed to be in combat. This particular subclass doesn't address that really at all. If anything, it provides incentive for people to avoid you, which is the last thing you want. The second weakness of a barbarian is they don't have a lot in the way of magical resistance. This class offers literally nothing for that, outside of arguably the temporary hit points, which is a loose a loose defense at best, very loose. And even then, you have to attack first before you get them. So if the caster's super far away and they're the only enemy and you can't reach them in time, you're at even more of a disadvantage. And the third problem that barbarians run into, and this one's kind of up for debate, is utility. Barbarians don't typically offer the party a lot of utility. Outside of battle, a lot of them are relatively worthless. There are some notable exceptions. Path of the Ancestral Guardian, for example, your level 10 ability does provide you with essentially the ability to gauge scenarios by magical means and spy as well, which is all fine. However, the Barbarian Path of the Battlerager doesn't do that at all. If anything, much like how I mentioned with the stickiness problem, it makes it more difficult for you. For example, I would make the argument that if you're trying to persuade someone to do something or curry favor while you're wearing menacingly spiked armor, you're going to have disadvantage on those attack rolls. You could also, I suppose, make the argument that intimidation rolls are going to have advantage, but that's kind of not raw, right? Like, it doesn't say that anywhere in the class, but logically that would make sense. I don't know. Overall, I'm not a huge fan of it, and sadly, I can't genuinely think of any ways to fix it as it is. I suppose you could add buffs onto some parts of it, and I suppose there might be some lore elements that you could take advantage of, but for the most part, I don't look at it very favorably. Cool concept, poor execution. I'm sure there's some homebrew versions of it that are much better done, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns of your own, please let me know down beneath in the comment section. I don't mean to harp on it too much. I'm just saying in comparison to a lot of the other subclasses I've read, it's just lackluster, like 1d4 piercing damage, followed up by temporary hit points equal to your con modifier, followed up by taking dash as a bonus action, followed up by dealing 3 damage when someone attacks you. It is problematic as far as I can tell. I don't know. Let me know what you think down beneath before I really start digging myself into a pit. But yeah, that's going to be about it for this video. Be sure to check out my interview with Nerdarchist Dave, link in the pinned comment. And of course, check out the guild hall and use code WELCOME to get a free one-shot. And that'll be everything, guys. I will talk to you all later. Next video coming out in a couple hours. And I hope you all have a great day. And as always, happy adventuring.